And welcome to another edition of the Terry Collins Show, presented by Tunnel to Towers, supporting America's greatest heroes. Donate just $11 per month by going to t2t.org. That's T, the number T.org. I'm John Arezzi, and joining me, as always, the former skipper of the New York Mets, analyst for SNY's Baseball Night in New York, Mr. Terry Collins. And Terry, welcome back for another week. I believe you're in New York right now.
I am, John. As a matter of fact, I've got baseball night in New York this week to discuss what's going on with the Mets and the Yankees, of course. But but I'm excited to get our show underway today. We've got a great guest in Josh Thole today, who's one of my favorite people. So I think it's going to be a real fun show.
Yeah, I do as well. The Mets have been having some fun. They are still doing pretty well. They head home after the road trip to Washington, which they split with the Nationals, 2 games apiece. And the Pirates, which saw the return of Edwin Diaz. Diaz spent 10 days on the suspension list for sticky hands. They remain right at 500 as we tape this, a couple of games out of the third wild card spot, but only 5 games behind the wild card leaders in that first spot, the Braves. So it's getting really interesting. Terry, let's talk about Diaz for a second. He got the save on his return Saturday in the 5-2 win against Pittsburgh. And then he had the blown save on Sunday, but got the win when the Mets rallied to beat the Bucks 3-2. From the rough start he had in the beginning of the year, the injury which had him sidelined, the suspension, the Mets need a healthy, productive Diaz if they're going to make a serious run in the second half. Your thoughts on Diaz and how important he is right now for the New York Mets?
Well, I will tell you, John, it goes to show you how hard this game is. I mean, you go back 2 years ago, and this guy was probably the best reliever in baseball. And so then he misses an entire year, and it just goes to show you how hard this game is when you take time away from something you're very, very good at. Even though he's had spring training, he's getting himself back in shape, it's not the same routines that he's had to do in the past. And so, yeah, he's starting to gets it going again, takes a little 10-day vacation, which, you and I can talk a lot about that. For 100 years, pitchers have been putting stuff on their fingers, and guys are still hitting 40 homers. So one player complains about it. Now we've got to have a new rule. But Edwin Diaz is a huge piece of this puzzle. That back end of of the bullpen, that guy that comes in that ninth inning is a tough role. People think it's easy, and it's not. I've seen a lot of good relief pitchers who were very, very good in the 7th and very, very good in the 8th, but had a tough time pitching that ninth inning. But he's got the great makeup for it. I thought his statement the other day where he said, look, I'm not going to change anything. I'm going to take the ball. I'm going to put rosin on my hands, dirt on my hands, and rub the ball up because that's what I've been doing for my entire career. And all of a sudden now it's not good enough. And I think, again, being accountable for that kind of stuff is what makes Edwin Diaz a great pitcher. But they are going to need him. You are absolutely right. They need that guy because now it just reshapes the way the bullpen is. Now you can use Ottavino in a different situation and have to maybe trying to save him for the 9th inning. You've got 2 or 3 of those guys down there because they've had so many relievers. They're bringing so many guys up. You can use those guys now in ways where they have a better chance of being successful because they've got the big horse to pitch that 9th inning.
Yeah, that's the rock at the end of that bullpen when you're talking about your closer. I mean, that's kind of the guy that everything is built around. And the Mets, as you said, they've used a lot of guys. They've used 22 different relievers so far this year. And the bullpen's ERA during Diaz's suspension was 8.37, which was the worst in the major leagues over those 10 games. So this is a glaring part of the 2024 Mets. Things are good. The offense has really come alive. Starting pitchers are going deeper in the games. But that bullpen is glaring. What does this organization and team need to do right now to put the bullpen in the right direction? How aggressive do the Mets have to be during the trade deadline to get some help? What's your assessment there, TC?
Well, you just brought it up, and it's a true fact. I thought David Peterson, he's starting to give him some length out of the rotation. You've got Senga, who's going to be coming back pretty soon. But when you let that starting pitching, when you start a game and you know that you're going to get Severino's going to give you 7 innings. It's you as a manager, you can sit there and say, hey, here's what I can do to piece together that seventh, eighth, and ninth inning. That little bridge to get to Diaz. It's a lot easier when you had 2 innings than it is when you got 4 innings that you got to get to, because you've got to every pitcher goes 5 innings, 70 pitches, and then they're out of the game. You got to manage 4 innings, and some of those guys are getting worn out by it, I think. So now it's going to be a different situation as those pitchers are getting deeper in games. It's going to change the way that bullpen is used. And yes, I don't think there's any question that the Mets are going to be in this hunt for the rest of the season. And I bet at the trading deadline, you're going to find them go out and find themselves another relief pitcher.
Yeah, I mean, there's rumors now, and the trade deadline is 3 weeks away, and we'll see what happens. But yeah, I have a feeling that they're going to go after some bullpen help as well. Terry, turning our thoughts to the All-Star game, the selections have been made. The Mets had just one player as a representative this year, and that's first baseman Pete Alonso. It's Pete's third consecutive All-Star game, fourth overall in his career. Surprising, not maybe Pete making the team, but who didn't make the team. There was a lot of talk that, this was Brandon Nimmo's year, and he'd come alive in the last several weeks and doing quite well offensively, and he's just a spark plug. And Francisco Lindor made the case that he should be included as well. Terry, were you surprised when only Alonso was chosen this year?
I really was. I really was. When you talk about Francisco Lindor, John, here's a guy. Okay, we know he's a star. Obviously, he's a very, very good player. When they moved this guy in the leadoff spot, their entire offense changed. And so he's got 50 RBIs in the leadoff spot, for heaven's sakes. I mean, find me another guy in the league that's got those kind of numbers. And so I thought he would be deserving. I thought Brandon Nimmo, the fact that he's starting to swing the bat much better. Again, another guy with almost 50 RBIs. So I thought those guys have a chance, and I still think with the situation with they've got to find a replacement for Mookie Betts. They're going to have to find a replacement for Tatis. So I really hope that one of those guys gets the nod to fill that role.
That would be really nice to see either one of them or both of them, replace those injured players. When it comes to Alonso, his selection comes with the confirmation that he'll compete once again in the annual Home Run Derby. Pete looks for his third title in the Derby, winning as a rookie in 2019, which really kind of launched his star and made the entire world of baseball aware of this guy and how talented he was. And then Pete wins again in 2021. There was no Derby in 2020 because of the pandemic. Pete is going to try to tie Ken Griffey, who has a record of 3 Derby titles since competition began in 1985. TC, from the futures game, the kickoff of the MLB draft, the Home Run Derby, and all the other festivities, including the game itself, it's all come a long way over the years. What do you enjoy most about All-Star Week?
Well, I just think it's a tip of the cap to the greatest players in the game, guys who you tell your players every year in spring training, hey, look, all you want is have a good, consistent year and go out and show everybody how good you are. And you get rewarded by being on an all-star team, and we'll talk about it later on as we get closer, John. But, the all-star game is supposed to be fun. It's supposed to be, a tribute to those guys who've had great starts. Maybe, and some of them are young guys for the first time and make an all-star team. But you look at the end of their careers, there's always one stat that shows up. Hey, here's this guy's career, but boy, he made an all-star team in 2024. I mean, that's big. That's big for a guy, a young, especially any player, but a young player, as he continues to grow throughout baseball, to have some all-star game recognition. I think it's a tribute to them. And by the way, they get paid for that stuff too, so it's pretty important on that end of the scale.
Especially if you're in the Home Run Derby. I think it's $1 million prize if you win that bad boy. So, yeah, there's money involved as always. But and I think this year there are close to 30 players who are first-timers. So it'll be great to showcase them when the All-Star game takes place next week. And we'll have more on the All-Star game and some reminiscing with TC about his being a manager once in the All-Star game. So we'll talk about that next week. But TC, let's take a look at this week in Mets history. July 6, 2010, Johan Santana hits his first career home run at Citi Field, throws a complete game, 3-hit shutout against the Reds. The Mets won that game 3-0. Terry, do you miss seeing pitchers hit in the National League?
Yeah, I do. I'm a traditionalist. I loved it. I thought it was, and another thing, I mean, you had to manage a game. Because you had to make decisions. Hey, you're down 4-0 in the sixth inning of a game, and your pitcher's going to come up to hit with two guys on, and you're thinking, okay, do I let him hit, or do I need to pinch hit for him? I better get relievers going. And the strategy of the game was so much more fun with pitchers hitting. And I missed it. Some of the guys loved to hit. And then you had the Bartolo Colones who hated to hit. And when he got a hit, it was a celebration. So, I mean, there are two factors, but I used to love it when pitchers hit.
Yeah, that had to be a surprising at bat for you, and Cologne hit that home run out. Who were the best hitting pitchers that you've seen over the course of your career?
Oh my gosh, there's so many. I always thought my time when I first got to the big leagues in Pittsburgh, Doug Drabek, Bobby Walk, Zane Smith, those guys worked at it every day. Every day. It was always amazing. And so I look at my staff in those young guys in 2016. I mean, you had Harv could hit, Syndergaard could hit, DeGrom could hit, Matz could hit, Wheeler could hit. And Bartolo, again, he didn't like to hit, but I'll tell you one thing, we found out he was dangerous. But I've seen some really good hitters. The Braves have always had very, very good hitters in their pitchers who were good hitters. And I'm trying to think, there was a guy that was with the Diamondbacks who probably was the best hitting pitcher, that I had ever seen. But, Don Drysdale, they said it was a very, very good hitter at one time. And so there are those guys that, were dangerous offensively. And we used to preach it because I always thought if your pitcher you could put the ball in play, you were dangerous. And so it wasn't just an automatic out like a lot of people think, oh, the pitcher's coming up, he's an out. Boy, if you could put the ball in play, and R.A. Dickey, I don't know if you remember, John, but he used it like a 36-inch bat because he wanted plate coverage. And he could put the ball in play. Matter of fact, he told me several times, hey, don't be afraid to hit and run with me. I'll put the ball in play. So that's a different weapon when you have a pitcher who can hit.
Yeah, the game has certainly changed, and I miss the pitchers hitting myself. I still love to see the guys get up there, and a lot of them took so much pride in their hitting as well. So baseball has changed, and you can't you have to look forward, right? But we miss those pitchers hitting. Finally, this week in Mets history, July the 9th, 1969, Terry, I remember that year well. The Miracle Mets were in a pennant race for the first time in their history, and in the biggest 3-game series of their history, they were facing the team they were chasing, league-leading Chicago Cubs, who were ironically, in the Eastern Division. The first year that there was divisional baseball was in '69. So the Mets were chasing the Cubs. Tom Seaver, on that night, on July 9th, 1969, pitched what he called his imperfect game that night. Seaver threw 8 1/3 perfect innings of baseball before Cubs part-time outfielder Jimmy Qualls spoiled the bid with a bloop hit, which fell between Cleon Jones and Tommy Agee. Tom Terrific got the final 2 outs and had to settle for a 4-0 complete game shutout. And get this, Terry, a record crowd at Shea Stadium. The stadium only held 55,000 people. There were 59,000 people in the house that night. How they all got in there, where they stood. It was the biggest series in the history of the Mets, and 59,000 saw that almost perfect game by Tom Seaver. Terry, do you have any memories of that amazing Mets team from '69?
Only the World Series games, because again, back then, John, you didn't have there wasn't a lot of televised baseball.
There was a game of the week.
'69. So
yeah,
I didn't see any National League. I lived in Michigan. So
Yeah.
the only games we really saw on TV weekly were the Tigers.
Yeah.
And so I didn't see much National League, but when you got to see him in the World Series and you saw how talented Seaver was and how talented Kuzman was, and you're thinking, wow, these guys are really good. And so, and obviously they played the game the right way. I mean, those guys, they all they handled the bat, they ran the bases. So that was an interesting year. But I only got my taste of the Mets and by watching them in the World Series.
Yeah, that was an amazing year for sure. I was 12 years old. I remember it like it was yesterday. Check out Mets history every day by going to at NYM History on X. And now it's time for this week's Talkin' with TC. Today on Talkin' with TC, we welcome a former catcher for the New York Mets who played for the organization from 2009 to 2012. On June 1st, 2012, he was behind the plate when Johan Santana pitched the first no-hitter in team history. He was also R.A. Dickey's battery mate for many games during R.A.'s Cy Young 20-win season that year. He was traded with Dickey to the Toronto Blue Jays after the season. Those main players who the Mets got back, Noah Syndergaard and Travis d'Arnaud. Josh played for the Blue Jays from 2013 to 2016, now involved in the game as a youth baseball advocate. He's a favorite of TC's, so let's say hello to Josh Thole. Josh, welcome to Talkin' with TC.
John, thanks for having me on, and I am completely thrilled to do this. I have listened to all of TC's and yourself podcast. Has got me through a lot of days of mowing the lawn. So I do appreciate it, and I'm thrilled to be on here.
Well, Josh, I want to thank you for coming on. This is, John, I got to tell you, this guy's one of my favorite players I've ever been around. As a coach, and I don't care at what level, you always got to love the guys who show up and give you every ounce of what they've got. And there's overachievers in every phase of the world. This guy is one of the best overachievers I've ever been around, especially in baseball. He worked so hard at his trade. He's behind the plate. He had great and gave the pitching staff confidence. Some of the best at bats I've ever seen. Just battle his butt off every time he was at home plate. And directed a good pitching staff. So, Josh, thanks for coming on. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Skipper. I appreciate the kind words. It definitely. I feel like I was against the 8 ball from the day I got drafted, but you do. You put in the time, you put in the work, and you get the right people in your corner, and that's what matters.
So I want to start out, Josh. I want to ask you, first of all, tell me who the toughest guy you ever had to catch was. Yeah. Of all the guys you had to catch, who was the toughest?
Well, that's an easy answer. Obviously, R.A. Dickey. That's why I have gray hair on my chins. I have gray hair in my head. People blame it on the kids and the wife. I blame it on R.A. But it was a lot of sleepless nights. But very, it was how it all kind of came to fruition so organically, and where we ended up was something in my baseball career that obviously means so much to me.
Josh, this guy, the year he had when you were behind, and you caught him all the time. I mean, the year he had, was there a game that you said when you were back there and you said, "Oh, this may not be good today. This is that ball was moving or whatever it was." I mean, can you remember a game when you were saying, "Oh man, this is going to be a tough one today"?
Yeah, not necessarily specifically, but I mean, I just remember being in the bullpen night after night after night. The year he won the Cy Young in particular, he got to a spot where he was like deciding which way he wanted his knuckleball to go. So he would say, "I want to throw this knuckleball high in the zone," and then sometimes it wouldn't go high in the zone; it would come down, square me up in the gut. So it's like that. That the vast majority of that season was very, very challenging because of the movement on the ball. And something that Doug Marabelli told me, he said, once you come to the realization that you're going to lead the league in pass balls, you will be much more successful. And it took me a while to get comfortable with my stance, my setup, and then finally knowing I'm going to lead the league in pass balls. And that's just the nature of this beast. But that year where he ran off all of those wins and won the Cy Young, it was, every 5 days I was sweating it.
Josh, I remember one time the game in Tampa Bay that you threw the one hitter.
Yep.
You caught him that day. And I remember you coming back to the bench and telling me, TC, the other team's laughing. They're talking to themselves. Do you remember that?
I do. Yes, I do remember that one in particular. And then another team that always like just would be kind of befuddled, I guess is the right word, would be the Washington Nationals, like the veteran guys on the team, Adam Dunn, LaRoche, Ian Desmond. It was these guys that there were so many days during that stretch, so many games that he pitched during that stretch where the hitters didn't know what to do. We saw guys changing their stance, had guys looking back at me saying, I'm just not going to swing, so good luck catching it. And some guys were banking on that I would just miss strike three and they would take off running. If you go watch like some of the strikeouts over the course of the year, a lot of hitters swing and they just start to first because they say, we have no idea if Tully's going to catch it or not.
That I'm telling you, that was a remarkable, and you know, the days. I mean, there was days I could just picture or see the frustration on your face because it was so hard to catch. I mean, balls are bouncing off. You had to get some ice bags when those games. Some of those games were over, didn't you?
Yeah, the inner thighs. I always used to laugh like the inner thighs is where I carry most of my fat, and I would have like just dark black welts all over my leg all season long, and you just chalk it up to say, all right, we'll get them. We'll get them healed at the end of the season. But it's funny you mentioned that because I remember like RA one time telling me like, hey, just like lock it in. And I was like, lock what in? I said, this ball is moving 15 different directions. Like I couldn't be any more locked in, dude. I'm not trying to run to the backstop. So we always had fun with it. But yeah, there was a lot of bumps and bruises that came along with it. Not foul tips, whiffs by the glove.
So tell me, Josh, who's the easiest guy you ever caught? When the game started, you just said, "Oh, this is going to be easy tonight."
Well, I will say this. I mean, when I was with the Blue Jays, I caught Mark Burley one time in my career, and that was like lefty, work at like an incredibly fast clip and not shake you off. You just put the sign down. He threw it where you wanted it. He was one of them. And I'll say like Johan was when I had Johan in New York, he was the other one that, you know, he put together a game plan. We put together a game plan and we stuck with the game plan, and he was a savvy veteran that knew where he was throwing the ball. So, you know, two left-handers who knew what they were doing made my life easy.
Yeah. So obviously you brought up Johan. So the next thing, and obviously some of the biggest questions that I'm sure, you know, John's going to have questions on it and the fans are going to have questions on us. Running me through your thought process on June 1st when he pitched the no-hitter.
Well, let's start in the bullpen. Obviously Johan's like pitch was his changeup. He didn't have a great feel for his changeup in the bullpen, which for the fans and John, I mean, TC knows this, but that didn't indicate anything. Like there's many a days pitchers would have dominant stuff in the bullpen and just feel super sharp, go out there and couldn't make it out of the second inning. And then there was times where guys literally walked off the mound mid warm-up and said, I'll figure it out on the mound and go out and deal. So the changeup wasn't really there in the bullpen, but his like little cutter slider thing that he had a pretty good feel for it in the bullpen. Didn't think anything of it. We still knew we had to work the changeup in to get it going, but we utilized the little slider cutter thing over the course of the first few innings. I had no idea that we were even in the midst of a no-hitter until the sixth inning, and it dawned on me that Johan, and Skipper can attest to this, Johan, when he would pitch, was like just like this goofy, crazy guy, and like it didn't matter if he was pitching or not playing, you would have no idea. But after the sixth inning, he sat down at the end of the bench all by himself and didn't talk to anybody, and that was uncharacteristic. At that point, I looked up at the board and I realized we had a no-hitter. Obviously, didn't say anything to anybody. Nobody was even really talking about it until we got later after the seventh. I think Skip, yourself, myself, Dan Worthen, we had a brief conversation of what his stuff looked like because we were inching up on the some pitch count numbers. But fast forward to the eighth inning, then it got a little tight. The old sphincter got clinched up a little bit. You didn't want to be the guy to ruin it. So, I would go out with a plan with Johan. I would talk to him right before he went out. How do you want to start this guy? How do you want to finish him? And I just tried to to minimize the amount of shakes so we could continue to move. But it got pressing. It got pressing in the 8th and 9th inning. I tip my hat to these guys, more than a hat tip, but these guys who throw perfect games fascinate me because Johan, we had walked a couple guys, so we had some wiggle room. You don't have to throw a 3-1 cookie. You don't have to give in to the hitters. And we were able to balance around that later in the game, which was obviously helpful. But it was stressful. It was, trying to get them through hitter to hitter to hitter, and knowing that we had minimal bullets left.
Yep. Josh, I remember the conversation we had on the bench, by the way. I was going to talk about it, but, that in the 6th, 7th thing, I believe, of course, I'm a nervous wreck because I'm aware about the pitch counts and about, coming off the injury. And, he just pitched a complete game the day before and the time before. And so I'm, thinking, holy cow. And when I went and said, how is he doing? And you just gave me this real confident look like, hey, Skip, he's okay. I mean, he's still making pitches and change-ups working. And so I said, okay, then, go get him. And but you were saying like, you had a little wiggle room. I'm telling you, I wish I could tell you in the 8th inning, I just wanted you to throw that stinking ball down the middle and take our chances because the one thing I didn't need was 2 more base on balls. Yeah. And then in the 9th, sure enough, in the 9th inning, if he doesn't go 3-2 on Freeze, I said, "What the heck is going on here?" But you know what? The fact that you had that confident look, like, "Hey, it's okay." And then when I went to him in the 8th inning, and he looked me right in the eye and he said, "Listen, I'm okay. I've got this." And I said, "Okay, pal, you're my idol. Go get him." And yep. You guys finished it off. But that certainly was an unbelievable night. Hey, Josh, from where you sat behind the plate when Molina hit that ball to left field, did you get a good look at that catch Mike Baxter made? Did you think he was going to make that catch?
No, I didn't think he had a beat on the ball. Right off the bat, I just thought it was a hit. And from my perspective, he came out of nowhere. And then when I saw him crash, I just didn't know. Did he hold on to the ball? I couldn't see really what had happened. But I will say this, as you replay the evening, that is like, those are the moments that you say, oh yeah, something special can happen because of something like that. I mean, you see it in a lot of like no-hitters and perfect games of like the one play that like saves the no-hitter or saves the perfect game. And that was a moment that stood out. But I'll be honest, Skipper, like off the bat, I just thought it beat him.
Yeah, I did too. I'm going to tell you that what a catch. And I will tell you what, you talk about a guy who sacrificed himself for a no-hitter because this beat him up bad.
Yeah.
And
I don't the same player.
I don't think he played for didn't we have to put him on the DL that next day?
Yep.
Yeah, I think we did.
Broken collarbone. And then like, this was a guy who I played in the fall league with going back, 2009, I think, who was arguably one of our best hitters in the fall league and has always hit. And that was a moment where he did. I mean, he put his career on the line for that because he played a little bit after that, but was never the same guy. And he'd be the first to admit it.
Yeah, I've talked to Johan several times since the no-hitter. He's one of the best guys I've ever been around. He wants to reassure me all the time that, look, it's okay. Don't worry about it. You don't have to hold any grudges. I was going to finish the game anyway. But I will tell you, he told me he had a painter do some paintings, and he did 4 of them. And he has one for you, one for me, one for Baxter, and one for himself. And I've been trying to get a hold of him because every time I see him, he says, I got those pictures, those paintings. I got to get to you guys. And but you never know where he's at. You never know where he's at. But I'll be excited. I'll be excited to finally get a hold of them to where we can get those distributed because I'll bet they're exciting.
Yeah, Johan signed with the Blue Jays for like a brief year in spring training. And I'll never forget, we were out stretching behind in the outfield, and Josh Donaldson said, "Hey, JT, what did Johan get you for the no-hitter?" I was like, "No, in fact, I actually got him a bottle of like Johnny Walker Blue labeling engraved that had like the date on it." And he's like, "Wait, he didn't get you like a Rolex or nothing?" I said, "No, all I kept getting was, Poppy, I have the painting at my house." And I said, "I'm still waiting on it." I'm glad he's not at least just lying to me.
No, and the part that really scares me, Josh. His house was in Fort Myers, and they got that horrible hurricane. So I don't even know if they're still around anymore. Those paintings. But I got to get a hold of them. That was,
Yeah.
that was really something. So when you went to Toronto, uh, when we traded RA, and then you were part of the deal, did you like shrug your shoulder and say, "Oh my God, not more, not
Yeah,
more of
I did.
this"?
I did.
Did you?
I joke with RA. RA always says, "Hey man, I got you paid. Like I got you your contract." And I'm like, "You didn't really necessarily give me my contract. Like I was playing every day for the New York Mets, and then I get traded and I become a specialty catcher." But
Yeah, I know it.
it was
I know.
I'm very grateful. I was very grateful for that opportunity. And it was something that at that point I enjoyed doing, because that's the other thing when catching a knuckleball. You have to love to do it. And I think, Alex Anthopoulos, who's a general manager in Toronto, who I have the utmost respect for, he gave it a run because I had some minor league options left. He let like Henry Blanco. Henry had some history with the Mets and doing it a little bit, and then let J. Pierre and Sibia do it, and then Russell Martin wanted to do it, and all three guys called me while I would be optioned in the minor league, saying like, I'm going to go in the office and I can't do this anymore. I'm not having fun doing it. And that's like the bottom line. You have to just take a deep breath and know that you're going to be the guy who is going to lead the league in pass balls, and you're going to enjoy doing it. And that was my ticket. That was my ticket to the big leagues, to stay in the big leagues, to be quite frank.
Yeah. So, John, you have some questions for Josh.
I do, absolutely do, and I'm gonna go back to that great night, June 1st, 2012, uh, and this is for both of you. Um, that night, you were making your return, Josh, after suffering a concussion, May 7th. I guess you had a collision with Ty Wigington against the Phillies, and it was reported back then that Terry tried to kind of talk you out of playing that night because of your concussion. And tell us about that conversation, both of you. I mean, and Terry, you had your concerns anyway with as the pitch count was rising throughout the game, but now you have a catcher behind the plate coming back from a concussion, so that had to be very stressful. So talk to me and the audience about that dialogue pregame, during the game, and what those concerns were with Josh.
Yeah. So,
Well,
go ahead,
go
Skip.
ahead, Josh. No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, so it was a lot had to do with the amount of time that I was on my rehab assignment, because there was paperwork. There was an issue with the paperwork at the league office about me getting cleared. So that was like the concern was, do I have enough at bats? What is like it? Am I ready? And I remember calling Skipper and just saying like, I'm ready to go. I feel healthy. So I had to lobby my way back, to be honest with you, a little bit, and Terry and Sandy and the group, the front office, made the decision. So that is that's something that actually goes unnoticed a little bit, but it is that's a pivotal moment in my career, obviously.
Well, Josh, I will tell you one of the things, and I only had probably several guys were concussed at one time and never said anything. I mean, the concussion started, those syndromes started popping up a lot, and there was, so I'd had a couple of guys who, after they had a concussion, had a tough time when they got, especially when they got back to the big leagues, being able to stay focused for 9 innings.
Yeah.
Because for some reason their mind just kind of wandered, and geez, you could see their eyes dilating. So I didn't want to. I wanted to make sure that hey, look, if you start this game, I want to make sure you finish it, or I got to make sure I have somebody ready. So, that was a big concern for me to when that game started, because I know that you guys, like you said earlier, I mean, catching Johan, he's one of those guys that, hey, look, I'll put it where you want it, kind of a guy. But it was about being able to maintain the focus throughout the game, and that's where one of the things I was truly amazed at when I went to you in the seventh inning and said, "How's he doing?" And man, you were, hey, look, he's doing just fine. He's doing, we still got the stuff still there, and he's still locating it, so I'm okay. And so I was relieved knowing that you were going to be okay for that.
Yeah, I appreciate that, and I remember the conversation when I got back to New York. Was you had said to me, you said like, my concern is that you're not going to be able to play 9 innings, and I can't, like, it's just not how the National League works. You can't just play 7 innings and then we replace the catcher. And I remember one thing that I spent so much time on when I got back was was retention of going through and just watching countless hours of video. So I would try to retain as much information as I could, and quite frankly, not forget it, because this was probably one of my worst concussions that I had when I got hit at home plate by Ty. So believe me, I was a little nervous, but like the fight and us as players, we're not just going to lay down, but that's a fair concern, and that was something that dawned on me, because as a player, we're just like go go go, and from your perspective, Skipper, is a fair point of like I can't take you out in the seventh inning because your brain's not working. This is not how this is going to go. So that's an
Yeah.
interesting talking point.
Well, it was a stressful night, but it turned out pretty good for everybody that evening. Maybe TC had a little bit of extra anxiety though at the end of that game. Uh, but pivoting over to RA, and you go back with RA, you caught him, I believe, in Buffalo as well. Is that where the relationship started? And so, talk to us about that development of that relationship with RA Dickey, and you, becoming that preferred catcher for him over the course of the relationship, and then going to Toronto with him. And then I want to ask you what you felt about the city of Toronto and playing up in Canada.
Yeah. It started spring training of 2010. Skipper, you were the field coordinator in 2010,
Yeah.
right? You were probably part of this
Right.
conversation, but I got called into an office full of staff members, and they said, we're going to send you to Buffalo unless like something happens where all these guys go down. And because I had played September of 2009 in the major leagues, so coming to camp, really didn't understand how it worked. But they said, we just signed a knuckleball guy. We want you to play every day, but we don't want that to be a day off for you. So, for example, like you're not going to play 4 days and then sit out because you can't catch RA. So I took it upon myself that spring training to follow RA Dickey around, play catch in the outfield with him, catch all of his bullpens. It was kind of like my little project for that spring. And I'll never forget, his very first bullpen was in front of Fred and Jeff, and they were standing behind the pitcher's mound, and I didn't catch one ball. And I just thought to myself, like, well, that's a terrible first impression, but hopefully we both go to the minor leagues and can figure it out. So yeah, we went to Buffalo that year, and something interesting right before he got called up that a lot of people, I don't know, remember, but we were playing the Durham Bulls in Buffalo, and leadoff hitter gets a base hit, and then RA retired 27 in a row. And then I think he got called up shortly thereafter.
Wow. And then going to Canada with him, you playing in a different country. Tell us about that experience of being a Toronto Blue Jay.
Yeah, it was. I love Toronto. Family loved Toronto. It was an awesome city. It's not New York. New York was my home. That's who I was brought up with. That will always be my first love. In fact, all of my kids are diehard Mets fans. But my experience in Toronto, being part of the playoff teams in 2015 and 2016, will be something that I'll never forget. Skipper, it's nothing. There's nothing better than playing in October. I mean, that was something that I will never ever forget, and I wish we had more opportunities, with the Mets to do that.
So you actually also played for two interesting characters, not characters, but smart baseball men. Different personalities is what I meant between TC and Gibby, who's now bench coach for the Mets. Talk about that dynamic of working with the relationships of the managers that you had with Terry in comparison to John Gibbons.
Yeah, so I had, obviously, TC and our relationship was much different because I was playing a lot more. So when you're a backup catcher, your relationship is different than it is your relationship is different with the skipper when you're the backup catcher versus like the front line, like catching every day. And I caught a lot of games in New York under TC. And again, I mean, the whole thing about the baseball world is when you put yourself around baseball people, you learn so much. And that's where I learned. I mean, there's so many days of just getting called into the office. I mean, Skipper just 2:00 in the afternoon saying, JT, come see me. And really helping me through the growing pains of being a young starting catcher in New York. I can't thank you enough for that, number one, because that was the biggest hurdle for me to grow as a player, was like understanding what it meant to be an everyday catcher, first off, but an everyday catcher for the New York Mets. And quite frankly, what it required and what you asked of us was important. And that's something that, like, I tried to tell, those same lessons you've taught me, I tried to pass them down in the industry to younger catchers. And then as far as Gibby goes, I had a great relationship with Gibby. Again, not a whole lot of interaction when you're the backup catcher, or quite frankly, the specialty catcher. But again, like you said, John, good baseball guy, smart baseball guy. And as TC said at the top, like when you're like, I'm going to call it fighting for your life day in and day out, because that's like what I did, right? You didn't take any day for granted. So you try to learn as much as you can, and from the old school baseball guys, which I appreciate, because I am a baseball traditionalist, and not to go down this rabbit hole, but I think, there's issues in the industry as we speak.
Yeah. Um, I want to ask one more, then I'll toss it back to TC. After your retirement from baseball, you maintain a relationship with the Mets, and you took part in some fantasy camps, I believe. You went to the Old Timers game a few years back. And since you said your children are diehard Met fans, so I guess you keep tabs on what's going on in the organization. Give us your assessment so far of the 2024 Mets and the current organization led by Steve and Alex Cohen, and the new president of baseball ops, David Stearns.
Yeah, well, first and foremost, I have a lot of respect for Fred and Jeff Wilpon. They were part of the group that gave me my opportunity. I think seeing what Steve and Alex have done there has been great, as far as like bringing back the alumni. I've been very fortunate. I was very fortunate to play in the Old Timers game, which was like, now looking back on it, I was doing Jay Horowitz a favor. I probably should. I mean, there was like some like real baseball players there. I felt as if like I didn't belong in the same room as those guys. I was actually listening to your podcast with Roger and Turkey the other day, and I just thought to myself, like, God, I was like in the same room as all of these like Hall of Fame guys, and I was like, oh, that was a little crazy. But needless to say, I thought it was. It's great to get the former players back. It's great to be part of New York Mets history. I definitely think they're on the right trajectory of like engaging us, because I'll say this, like, we enjoy that as a former player. We enjoy coming back and being part of whatever it might be. And I'm back on the fantasy camp circuit this next year, so I'm excited. TC, I'll see you in Port St. Lucie again.
Good.
So I do enjoy doing those type of things and giving back to the fans that, as I tell them, as they booed me. So I said, I'll still give back to you, even though you guys booed the crap out of me.
TC, back to you.
So Josh, you're stepped away from baseball, but I know you're still active up in Binghamton. I know you do a lot of things. So tell me what you're doing up there, and what your hopefully things you may want to do in the future.
Yeah. So my we moved back to Binghamton in 2018, and then opened 2 Pilates studios, which I don't do the Pilates studios. I just helped open them. My wife does the Pilates, and I run a travel baseball program, which is very, I try to keep it, travel baseball has a bad name, right? I think Little League is important. So all of my kids play Little League, and that is the priority. But I put together a group of kids, both 9U and 12U, mainly because that's my kids' age, 2 of my 2 boys' age. And we play a handful of tournaments a year, but it's, I try to give back as much as I can in teaching the game. That's what I love. I love teaching the game. I love like the X's and O's of the game. So I never want to give that up. And that's pretty much, we spend the winter practicing. And again, I do some private lessons, but I'm trying to move a little bit away from that. More so, I just like the in-game strategy of all the things that I've learned over the course of my career. Try to pass it on to whether it be parents or kids.
So, Josh, maybe, and I know a lot of you guys, once you retire and you've got young kids, you want to, hey, look, when you were playing and they were even younger, you were away so much, but, you want to be part of their lives now. Have you thought about maybe wanting to get back in the pro game and manage in the minor leagues, or try to be a big league coach, or is that ever entered your thought process yet?
Well, it has. I've definitely thought about it. My kids are at a really good age where, like, I mean, our weeks are filled with sporting events and concerts and all of that, and I'm trying to weigh that. I do think, maybe one day down the road, I would like to get back into it. I understand that you run the risk of, like, it being too long, before, as you're out. So if you're out for too long, they say a lot of times it's hard to get back in. But I think where I sit today, I'm very comfortable with, like, just doing it with my children and being part of, like, their life, just because I miss so much of it. As especially my oldest son, he kind of coattailed me around my career, and now it's his turn, and I want to be part of that. And it would just be hard for me to be on the road for 8 months again, and miss a lot of this.
Well, I will tell you, Josh, the game needs energy. It needs people who care. Obviously, I'm an old school guy, and John and I, if you've seen the podcast, we discussed the new image of the game today and the way it's played. But there's something about having old school guys who have a passion for it, who gave it their all, and so therefore, that stuff, things that leak out of the things that you teach, that other players learn from. And I'm always excited when I hear about guys. I've talked to Kadire about trying to get back in. Of course, David, I talked to him trying to get, and again, they say, hey, look, when my kids get to be a certain age, maybe, and and it's very, very fortunate. But I tell you, the game needs the Josh Tholes of the world, guys who, hey, look, grind it out every day, and the way you had to get better. I was telling some people the other day, we were talking about the Mets and stuff, and I brought your name up. I said, here's a guy that you put a bat in his hand, and he went up and he ground out an at bat. Here's a guy who didn't have the best arm, and yet he learned how to get the ball to second base quicker than anybody. He took what he had and made it better. And those are the things, Josh, I think the game needs. So if that thought process ever comes in, certainly I hope you get a chance to, because I mean, the game really does need some old school flavor to it, I think.
Well, I appreciate that, Skipper. It definitely means a lot to me, and I've been fortunate to have good coaches who I've learned from, and I think that's why I'm such a traditionalist. Because I had a hard time. I caught the tail end of my career where, like, some of the newer innovative stuff was coming in, and I just, like, shook my head and said, I don't, like, doesn't smell right. Like, baseball is a different animal, top to bottom. The X's and O's are different, and it's not cookie cutter. So I appreciate that, and I will say this, like, that statement means a lot to me, and I will continue to give it thought as my kids get older, for sure.
But I hope you do it. So, John, I know we've got some questions from the fans that write in, so let's go to those.
Yeah, we have a few questions that have come in that we've selected, and the first one comes from our Instagram account, and that is from Akash Rathi. Did you use a different catcher's mitt when catching R.A. Dickey?
I did. I used what was called the Sparks. It was called a Sparks mitt, and it was old, like, it was a women's softball catcher's mitt. So we would have to exchange when the skipper would come out to hook RA. He would have to tote my other glove out there with him. So I just use a conventional glove with the normal guys. But one thing I'll just add, like, the hardest part was the transition from the knuckleball to, like, a guy throwing gas out of the bullpen. I mean, there's been many a times where the first pitch in warmups went right over my head because of it.
Because that velocity increase from the knuckler. Second question, also from Instagram, comes from Eric Cheng. Did you catch back-to-back one-hitters? And if so, which one was more fun?
No, because Nicky has caught one no-hitter, or one one-hitter, and I caught the other one-hitter.
Okay.
So there was,
so you didn't catch both of them. So
I didn't catch both of them. I only caught the one in Tampa.
Okay.
Yeah, so that was one hitters are actually really exciting, especially you can start kind of playing a game at the end of it, and try to conquer the quest without all of the pressure.
Well, I guess what made up for that, not catching back-to-back one-hitters, was catching a no-hitter during your career.
Right.
We'll go to the third and final question. This comes from our X account from @MetStitches. Josh, are you on social media? And if so, where can we find you?
I do not have a social media presence, as the skipper said. I have a very or as I said to you guys, I'm a very much a traditionalist, and I do not engage in social media. However, I do use LinkedIn, but that's that's about it.
Right. Well, those are the questions that we got. Always a pleasure to talk to you, Josh. And we really appreciate you coming on. Back to Terry.
Yeah, Josh, I really appreciate you coming on, and it's a blast. It's a blast to be around you. You're so entertaining. You had, not only did you work hard, but you had a great attitude, and you enlightened the clubhouse. Guys are always loved it. When you were coming in and on the field, you enjoyed playing. So thanks so much for being on, and I look forward to seeing you at the fantasy camp this fall, and we'll have a good time with those guys.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate it, Skipper. Thanks for thinking of me, having me on. And again, I can't thank you enough for what you've done in my career, John. Thank you. I just want to end with one quick story that I want to see if TC remembers. We were in Philadelphia. I was on first base. R.A. Dickey comes up to bunt. I run down to second. Jimmy Rollins does this to me, which I thought he meant was foul. I turn around, and I get picked off at first base. So now they threw R.A. out and doubled me off. Skip, you remember that?
I don't.
All right.
No.
There's a very grainy video. There's a very grainy video about it, and I was just.
I'm gonna look it up.
Yeah,
I'm gonna look it up.
It was
Yeah.
quite a feat.
Yeah, that probably was. Yeah, that was probably a pretty exciting moment for me to see that.
No, I sat down and you said, "What the hell are you doing?" And I said, "Really?" So, well, thank you guys for having me on. It was awesome. Had a great time, and if I can ever be of assistance again, let me know.
Okay, thanks, Josh. Thanks a million.
Well, 2012 was an amazing year for Josh Thole, a great guy doing great things now for youth baseball. What a great guy, Terry.
Oh, outstanding. He's one of those guys, John, when he would come in the clubhouse, all of a sudden you'd hear laughter. He was funny. You guys would tease him. He could tease you back. Nobody took any offense from anything. But I'll tell you again, as I said before we talked to Josh, I'm going to tell you what, there are times when you run into guys who take their ability and get the absolute maximum out of it. And Josh Thole was one of those guys. He wasn't blessed with great power, so what he did, he learned how to handle the bat, and he hit the ball all over the ballpark, choked up. You remember he had it choked up about that far on the bat. Behind the plate, received the ball, wasn't blessed with one of those great throwing arms, but what he did, he got rid of the ball better than any catcher in the league. An accurate thrower to second base, and even third base. So he took what he had and he maximized it. And those are the kind of guys that are fun to be around. Those are the kind of guys that you could go to another player with better talent and say, hey, look, if you work as hard as that guy, you're going to be a star. And Josh Thole made himself a quality major league catcher because of his work ethic.
Well, it was a pleasure to have him here on the show today, of course. Now, Terry, it's time for the Tunnel to Towers Amazing Hero of the Week. Born from the tragedy of 9/11, the Tunnel to Towers Foundation made a promise to ensure we never forget. Since then, it's been committed to supporting America's heroes and their families. Heroes like fallen firefighter Jason Arno. Thanks to the generosity of friends like you, Tunnel to Towers paid off the mortgage on his family's home, relieving the financial burden and bringing stability to that family. And they've done it for so many others. This past week on July 4th, Tunnel to Towers announced 35 mortgage payoffs, including 3 recipients from Florida, 3 from New York. The foundation helps Gold Star and fallen first responder families, as well as our nation's most catastrophically injured heroes and homeless veterans. Join Tunnel to Towers on its mission to do good. America's heroes are counting on you. 95% of every dollar you give goes directly to its programs. Donate $11 a month to Tunnel to Towers at T2T.org. That's T, the number 2T.org. Never forget 9/11 or the sacrifices our heroes have made for us. And on this week's segment, we honor the aforementioned fallen firefighter from Buffalo, New York, Jason Arno. Let's go to that tribute of this fallen hero right now.
My husband's name was Jason Arno. He was a firefighter for the Buffalo Fire Department. He was our superhero. He loved being a girl dad. It was his favorite job in the world. He loved helping people, and he just really loved being a fireman.
We're here to recognize the sacrifice of Sarah Tierney's husband, Jason Arno, who made the supreme sacrifice at a warehouse fire on Main Street here in Buffalo.
I'm a nurse, so I worked overnight, and luckily we caught each other in the morning, so I got to give him a kiss goodbye. And around 10, I got a knock on the door. It was a priest, and he had been in a fire that morning. We went to the scene. At that point, they had found him, and they wrapped him in the flag. And we drove to the hospital in the ambulance. That was that day. So I got a phone call one day from Frank Siller and gave me his sincere condolences and said that he was going to buy us a house. When your whole world is turned upside down and you feel like there's no hope for anything, to have the stress of worrying about paying a mortgage taken off your plate is really incredible.
Tunnel to Towers believes in supporting our fallen veterans and first responders as well as our mortally injured, and he believes that we should take the biggest burden away from them, which is paying off their mortgage.
I'm asking you to donate $11 a month so Tunnel to Towers can help other fallen first responder families like mine. Visit T2T.org or call 1-844-BRAVEST.
And we thank our sponsors, Tunnel to Towers Foundation. But Terry, before we wrap up the show for today, the entire Mets organization lost a member of its family last week. One longtime team photographer, Marc Levine, died suddenly on the 4th of July. Marc was with the Mets for 36 years. It was a devastating loss for current and past Mets players, staff, and everyone associated with the team. Jay Horowitz said the team won't be the same without him. We extend our sympathies to Marc's wife, Stephanie, and daughter, Samantha. Terry, your memories of Marc?
Well, truly one of the greatest people you'll ever meet. Unselfish, always there for everything you needed. To be honest, John, all the years that I've been in baseball, one of the worst days is when you have to do a team picture because, you got to round up 30 guys or 40 guys and get them together. And Marc was so gracious and he did it so efficiently. It was certainly having a team picture with him was easy, and anything you ever need, if you needed a picture for, someone called you and said, hey, look, I need a picture of this or that. Marc had it. He had it, and he'd get it in the mail to you right away. I was shocked when I got the word that he had passed away, and I feel just awful, and my sympathies go out to certainly his family. We've lost a good one. We have lost a good one, and he will be remembered a long time.
Absolutely, and Jay, because we just did a Tunnel to Towers piece with Mike Piazza, and we needed some pictures from 9/11, everything that happened. And within 24 hours, Jay's like, here you go. And it was from Marc. Anything else you need, you let us know. And just an amazing guy. I mean, just a quick little funny story. I mean, his first day with the Mets, and ironically, it was the first day of Gary Cohen. It was his first day with the New York Mets. It was in March of '89, and it was Team Photo Day down in Port St. Lucie. And that was the day that Keith Hernandez and Darryl Strawberry got into a little fisticuffs, and that was Marc's first day. So I saw some interviews where he relived that story, and what a hilarious moment that was. At the time, it was just kind of like, all right, these guys are, here I am. What did I get myself into? But what a long career, and how beloved this guy was, and he will be sorely missed. Terry, that's really going to wrap it up for this week. We'll talk to you next week. Have a great week in New York. So for Terry Collins, this is John Arezzi. Have a great week, everyone.